I think what we'll do tonight is read the Beatitudes for the last time. One more class on the Beatitudes. And then so that's 5 or 6 weeks, I think. And then we'll move on after that. I have plenty to say, but tonight we'll read the Beatitudes, and I'll give you, like we used to do, haven't been doing it so much, a little time just to soak them up and feel them. And do what you want with it, but maybe if you've been listening to all the weeks about it, maybe see the logical, Jesus just didn't throw them together. See the logical flow. The foundation that it builds in a soul, and what that foundation leads to. And then we'll get them posted up eventually in a nice poster, still waiting for someone to volunteer to make that and coordinate with me. Any one of you who can, that's you. And just maybe consider memorizing them, and for me, I can always, like, whatever God's doing in my soul, unless it's this vague thing that I can't see, certainly any stage of our spiritual life would show up in one of the Beatitudes. And it ought to bring somebody comfort at any stage where you're at, no matter what's happening to you. Whether you're being persecuted for being true, or whether you're being purified, humbled. At any stage in the Christian journey, someone should be able to read these and say, oh, I'm right where Jesus said I would be blessed to be. Okay, so we'll read them and let you guys soak them up. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when they revile you and persecute you, and say all kinds of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. I'll just give you guys some time to sit with that back. What I want to say tonight, I don't know if I'll be able to say it. I don't know if we are done with the Beatitudes, but I wish we had 2 more weeks. I hope you've seen how rich they are. Endlessly rich. This is it. This is your map. Sometimes people will say, hey, what should I be doing? I want to know what I should be focusing on. I think you find your answer in the Beatitudes. All the implications of them, it's everything. It's all there. And it lets you, like Jesus, in the scholarly world, the scholarly Christian world, they talk about the question, why didn't Jesus teach us why didn't he systematically explain everything he taught? And what they say is that's for much lower teachers. He gives the truth as it pours out from heaven. And then it's up to the scholars and the theologians and the mystics and the saints to break it all down and amplify it, and in new ways in each period of history, in ways that make it more relevant, right? That's the job of the church. That's the job of us. That's our job. How do you make that relevant to a person today who's struggling with nihilism, which is spreading like wildfire, right? Just no belief at all in anything, a meaningless purpose. How do you present this message in light of nihilism? So that's trying to make it work for today. Does that make sense? So Jesus just has to tell the truth, but it's up to us to be figuring out how that applies in every way. So this is why Jesus didn't teach a systematic spirituality, but the Sermon on the Mount is as close as we're going to get to it. And it's surprisingly systematic if you look closely. The flow of logic in the Beatitudes is something else. And I like maps. I like big picture maps. Just tell me the big picture. I'll work it out. I don't need you to fill me up with details because I know the Holy Spirit's going to do that part. But the big map, just give me some idea of where I'm going. This lays it all out for you. It's kind of neat. And in one way, it's telling you your vocation. Everyone wants to know. I know in the New Age that the biggest thing was just, what is my purpose? Why am I here? What's my purpose? We already know. It's right here. This is your purpose. Right? Think of that. This is your purpose. He tells you straight out what your purpose is. It's not a mystery. It's something the monk that, Father Patrick used to say, this works really well, it's just no one will try it. And there's also a bias of this age. We want all the details. We want them all right now, clearly stated. That's not how this works. We have to learn to be open to the mystery. So think of the Beatitudes now. We've grouped them up in various ways, but think of it now as being all about producing a person who's pure of heart. I know that's not the last Beatitude. The ones after pure of heart, though, are what they're doing in the world, right? And think of it holographically in the sense that every one of you has some of every one of these Beatitudes. Don't put yourself out. I don't have any of this. I'm so far from it. I don't have any. That's not true. The person who says they don't have any at least has a little poverty of spirit. At least, how many people call me when they're new and tell me all about how great they are? It's amazing. I wish I could be so great. I really do. It blows my mind. Oh my God, they're just on fire. So think about that. Even when you're saying, not me for sure. Thank God you're saying that. At least. But also give yourself some credit for knowing, I kind of am not. And maybe I'm not as spiritual as I thought. And that's not such a bad thing on this path. But pure of heart. And this is where I know I'm going to fail to speak it well. There's like a pit I don't want to fall into, and then there's a broad thing that I want to allude to. I don't know if I can do it, but think about the Beatitudes, what they're, first of all, purifying out of us. Like, pure of heart is two things. No will and desire for sin, strong will and desire for good, for love, for truth. And all the Beatitudes before pure of heart are concerned with that. That's what they're concerned with. To purify a person. And I want to say something, hope it's okay to say. So don't take any insult with it. If we all hung out all the time, factions would grow. There's not enough purity of heart in any community to not have trouble arise when the social instinct takes over for the spiritual instinct. Does that make sense? If Christ entered any one of your social groups, your jobs, your political allegiances, I guarantee Jesus finds a lot of sin in all of it. A lot of exclusion of the broken and the wounded, a lot of selfishness. a lot of pride. There's just no way when Jesus casts his gaze upon us that he doesn't see a whole lot that still needs done. A whole lot. And my daughter this morning said, I was talking to her about a very detailed part of purification and theology, but I didn't say that. She said, Dad, where do you come up with this? Not as a compliment. What are you up to? I said, I was just thinking last night about this, how we might have subtly damaged your life. And I want you to think about that, and if it's true, slay that. It was subtle stuff. But she's 12 years old. She's a grown-up now. I want her to know. Dad, is all you do is sit around wondering what you did wrong? She said, you guys are great parents. I said, Cass, I think we know that we've put an unusual amount of care into you. We know we're good parents. We're not saying we're bad parents. I don't say I'm a good parent, ever. But my daughter's talking. I'm not saying we're bad parents, Cass, but why aren't we walking on water? Why don't we have infinite love all the time? The standard of measure asks us to inventory the subtle things. I said, we don't think we've screwed you up, man. We know we haven't. You're great. But compared to what? The standard isn't the neighbors next door that let their kids watch horror movies when they're 5 years old. That's not the standard. See? There's a standard and it's Christ. So then, okay, so Jesus, so this purification, the first 3 parts of the Beatitudes, we're not done, right? You go into your workplace, I guarantee there's injustice going on. One person shared with me, this is something I want to share that's a story not fully told. So what I'm saying isn't a lie, but more information could come to light and it wouldn't be quite the way it is. Does that make sense? But I thought it was a great example anyway. One person is a professional in a place where there's some people that are good at social things and kind of cool. They're the enemies of Christ almost anywhere I go. This is my experience. The worst of the worst. Enemies of Christ. They create the culture. They create the social setting. They create everything, but they're not working with God, so it's all bullshit. But they're also the ones running it. I mean, the ones doing something. So it's tricky. Anyway, she found herself on the out group of that, not being included in invitations to places. Then she grew socially because she's doing her work. She started getting invited now. She's on the in group. But this is the part I'm not sure how it's going to play out. But some part of this person's heart said, but what about the people in the out group? And why aren't they included? Why aren't they? I could tell you why. Sin, selfishness, pride, arrogance. That's why, for sure. But what do you do about it? It's very tricky business. We don't know. There's going to be a lot more information on this. Another person I knew who worked in an office setting, this story is more resolved. Same kind of thing. Certain people talk louder, talk more, they bond better with socially, they start hanging out together, and it's a very broad office setting, so there's wings of the office. So but within the one sort of broad wing, they started getting food brought in for lunch. But there are a couple people they never once asked to be part of it. Never once. And I'm certain they never even thought to. Why? Because of profound sin and cruelty and hardness of heart and arrogance. But really why? Because the goal isn't God. The goal isn't one united family under God with a goal to bring everyone to God, no matter what the job is. Because the motivation isn't true. Right? The motivation is maybe some people are just trying to get ahead. Some people are just trying to go in and say, I just want to fit in for once in my life. I'm just going to do whatever they say. I've never fit in, and whatever they say, I'm just going to do it, and that's it. And let me just fit in. And if some people fall by the wayside, too bad. I don't want to be the out group, man. So I think what the Beatitudes are trying to do is they're trying to purify us of all of our, they want us to have poverty of spirit. I was thinking poverty of spirit. It means you found poverty of being aligned to social norms. The poverty of being aligned to a social instinct. To class. The poverty of being aligned to all of what we make in place of God's will. Poverty of preference. Poverty of opinion. Poverty of taking our security in fitting in socially, money, or sexual appetite, the instincts. And Jesus says, blessed are the peacemakers, later on in the Beatitudes, back in where we get to the action part. But how can one bring peace if they're not free from all of those conflicting motives that put us at war with God? And then this is kind of off track, but theologians say if you take the weight of the scriptures, and especially if you add the weight of Christ in the scriptures, there's just this huge bias and preference for the poor and the broken. That's who God values. And usually it's because those people can bring some of God's true light into the world. Whereas the ones who are thriving in the world have no time or inclination and no perceived need to bring the light. No perceived need to rock the boat either. Because for them, the boat is floating very well. So there's also no interest in seeing what is wrong. I've always been an outsider I would say now by luck. But it didn't feel like that. And I've always been able to look at the first time I started seeing it was middle school. The deep injustice, the way in which teachers treated certain students who had better backgrounds. Same violation of the rules, very different punishments for different groups. I started to see the systemic injustice. I didn't know what to call it yet. I didn't have language for it. I've never been a part of any group ever that I couldn't see it. It's everywhere. And it's really easy to see if you're on the outside, and it's really hard to see if you're on the inside. That's why prophets in the Christian tradition are often outcasts. It's just easy to see. Easier to see. So pure of heart is freedom from all of those motivations that drive us, that that make us complicit in sin. And for some reason right now, really on my heart is those who slip through the cracks, end up killing themselves, living in a world where no one loves them, all because of our social idolatries. The poor who slip through the cracks, even among sort of like politically motivated people who are interested in more equity, it seems like that bottom 10% is just absolutely forgotten. It's just forgotten. They're just permanently undervalued. And that's not the way God sees it. And it's easy to say, oh yeah, I know, but got to be realistic. But I think we're not being realistic. We're missing it. There's something there. There's hidden gifts and beauty in those people. More than once, an insane homeless person has come into my life and given me deep wisdom. Who listens to that, though? One guy he bit me after. Bit me right on the neck. Wanted a hug and bit me. And he had his teeth sharpened. They hurt. But it's like Carl Jung, I read this book, Carl Jung. He had patients that had genuine mental illness, but they were some of the things they would hallucinate were perennial mythologies that no one knew about at the time. He became convinced of the collective unconscious mind not being a genetic or biological reality because his insane patients were having hallucinations about specific mythologies that no one at the time knew about. They weren't published in English yet. So that, yes, they're broken. Something wrong. Okay. But maybe part of what's broken is the spell the world has on them that walls out God. There's truth to that. Jesus said, "Blessed are those who are persecuted." If you stand for what is true and right in your family, in your social circles, in the world, in your workplace, you're going to be persecuted a little bit for sure. You have to be willing to be put on the outside to stand for what is true in order to be a full-fledged, active Christian. You can't walk in hoping to fit in, can you? That can't be your main motivation. But our sin, it's so messy because I've never always known for sure, am I outed because I'm a jerk, or am I outed because I'm standing for Christ? It's so tricky, I never want to assume, so it's very tricky. But the truth is, if you're going to speak the truth to any group, the people who run that group will hate you. That's the truth. So then the question is your career advancement worth more than that? Maybe it is, probably not. Is your social advancement worth more than that? Probably not, but maybe. It's very tricky. Every situation is different, as we prayed about and thought about. But Jesus says we're the salt of the earth. We're meant to bring light. Peacemakers, blessed are the peacemakers. I think that's It's really about the problem of suffering. It's really about how do we end human suffering? How do we lessen human suffering? Surely this is what they're talking about. How do we lessen human suffering? And on the one level that we focus on the most, it's just get yourself in order with Christ. Right? Find peace. There's 3 me's in there and they all disagree. And there's my desire to do God's will and there's my desire to do not God's will. And there's conflict, and that's not peace. But there's also that part in which we become active in the world. And have to, maybe in a marriage, stand for what's right when the other person doesn't see it, when it's inconvenient, when it's difficult, when it's painful, but where maybe this sort of good you're at can be looked back on as sinful from the new place you could come to. But that's true in the workplace. It seems like all I hear about is toxic workplaces with leadership that is often unqualified. They might be intellectually trained, but the maturity isn't there. No wisdom. I knew a woman, I really liked her, from a different kind of spiritual group, and she was raped by her parents, and her parents let other people rape her as she grew up. And there was even some religious element to it. So it was about as dark as it gets. And but she had really worked hard in her life to excel, and she went to college, and she had a job at the government, and she could put on that professional face, and it'd be pretty good, you know. But then if you knew her personally, you'd see that the side of there's a beauty in people that have come from something like that and come out with just such a good in it, you know. But she told me that sometimes she experiences herself being persecuted, and she knows it's because of Christ, even though no one knows she's into Christ. But there's just that thing, that sore thumb, that thing about that person that bugs someone who's deeply wrapped in the world. And I did notice that when I became Christian, I noticed that it changed something, that new energy, that new light. It's not everyone patted me on the back and said congratulations. There's also that now you just don't fit. Something about you doesn't quite fit with what we're doing. One friend I really like, this is just so funny. He didn't have ambition for jobs, you know. He wanted to be a saint. So he's working at a grocery store, and they offered him a manager's position. And he didn't take it. And I said, why? And he said, it would have been like selling my soul to the devil. I don't want to be anyone. I just want to keep my focus on God. It's just a manager position at a grocery store. But my wife works at one, and interestingly enough, she said a pretty large number of the people who take those positions get proud about it. It's a grocery store, but they're just very proud. And if they're not good people, just that little authority It goes to their head. It's funny. It's not even wild oats. It's the normal old grocery store. So I think that's almost all I want to say about it. Think of the Beatitudes in that way, giving you the full recipe, the full set of requirements for union with God and being an agent of good in the world. And don't think it has to look like anything fancy. It's wherever you're planted, that's where it shows up. And think of the broken and the wounded and the one no one notices. And notice them. Love that one. One Zen master was visited by a noble person, and they acted subtly different towards the noble person as they did everyone else. And because of that, the person said, "I'm not a master." Okay, a couple little things. I do need help moving the chicken coop tonight. If I can get about 8 people out there, it'll be super easy. Just moving it right around to the dirt, no big deal. And then I want to say something semi-political. Don't worry, I'll never get political. But there's something going on that I want to point out. It's a short little thing, but I have a lot to say about it. And it has to do with evangelical and born-again Christians that are on both sides of the aisle. Okay, I hope this isn't a partisan thing to say, but that are willing to overthrow the Constitution to put in a Christian state, make it a Christian country. And I have a lot of nuanced things. I could give an hour talk about this. It intersects with homosexuality. I have something to piss off everyone on that subject, I'm certain. But they want to put in a Christian nation, but the only Christian policies that they want to enact are punitive. So, targeting anyone from the LGBTQ community, who, by the way, would be mad at me if they heard my full take. So I'm not picking sides here, but so I just want to point out that they do think it's okay to overthrow the Constitution to put in a Christian state. They have senators in place, and it's not a dead movement. That's what I'm trying to say. And I would love to live in a truly Christian nation. There are certain examples where they're socially conservative, but they're super generous, and nobody starves to death. Like nobody. It's kind of neat, But this kind of Christianity is not known for its spirituality, and it's not known for its rich theological tradition. So it's just people kind of reading the Bible and saying, yeah, that's what I think, and maybe not being challenged by great saints who could maybe point those fingers at them. And I know I would shut up. You get Christianity pointed at you, and one of the things you do is shut up more, because there's just nobody escapes, right? The love of God, and nobody escapes missing the love of God where there is sin. So they're very keen on ousting the homosexuals, but you know what you'll never hear come out of their mouth? You'll never hear a mandate to get rid of wealthy people. And it's interesting, because Jesus never mentioned homosexuality. I'm not saying it isn't in the New Testament. I'm not saying it's not a thing. I'd love to address it one day. I have a lot to say about it. But Jesus did mention the wealthy. And he said it was difficult, more difficult for a wealthy person to get into heaven than to pass through the eye of a needle. But he said something else that is lesser spoken of. I don't know if you've heard the parable of Lazarus. Not the raising from the dead Lazarus. Lazarus and the rich man. I don't know if you've heard this one. It's a great one. So here's the story. There's this rich person, and all his life he's living in wealth. And all the while he lives near Lazarus, who is poor, who doesn't have enough food, doesn't have clean water, doesn't have basic needs met, and always won't give, right? So then this is Jesus telling this story. It's just incredible. I love it. They both die. And there's this great chasm separating where the two are. On one side, the rich man is in a dry, hot, hellish place with no water. And on the far other side of this great chasm is Lazarus, who's in heaven. And the rich man says, Lazarus, Lazarus, please bring me, I'm just totally paraphrasing. Lazarus, Lazarus, please bring me water. But there's a chasm that has been fixed between them that no one can cross. And Jesus says about the rich man, you had your wealth in life, and you had your comfort, and you didn't share. And Lazarus might want to come help you, but the chasm is fixed so that no one can cross it. I think that's an interesting image. Jesus dared to say that to wealthy people. This group of Christians that wants to Christify the nation, they'll never tell that story. They'll never tell that story. They seek wealth. Its prosperity gospel is mixed right with it. It's not Christianity. It isn't Christianity. It's a political ideology that uses Christianity as a weapon. It's something just to pay attention to. I'm never going to get political in here. Don't worry. I don't really think I ever will. I know I won't. I kind of had a vision where they told me not to a long time ago. So I just never will. But I wanted to say be careful about that kind of Christianity that is sweeping the nation, that is mostly punitive, that sees sin in the other but not in the church. Because that kind of, if I don't clean my heart out before I try to help you, I'll be too hard on you when I should be hard. I should be hard on you when I should be easy. I'll be easy when I should be hard. My own sin will blind me from being able to help you. The kind of Christianity that wants to run the country, they see sin in the other, but they don't see sin in themselves. So what does that look like in the end? You root out some sin in them, but it's still dirty. It didn't fix how you feel. Then you got to root out more sin. That kind of Christianity in the end becomes cruel and authoritarian. It doesn't end in kindness and love. Because they're trying to fix a disorder in themselves by fixing you and me. And if you've ever been in a relationship like that, you know it doesn't ever work. Okay. That's all.